Okay, so today we're going to go ahead and get started on this project, and I'm going to show you some of the techniques I use, like melting the clocks, the shadows, and some of the lighting effects that were used in this project. Okay, so here is my canvas. I made this 18 inches wide by 12 inches high with a 300 ppi, and it's in RGB color. Now you can use any print size that you would like. It can be portrait or landscape. Just keep your PPI 300, and it's best to put this in RGB color because you want to have all the tools available to you. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to get into my Surrealism files that I saved. And you should collect as many files as you can. Anything that you think is interesting that you might use. It doesn't mean you have to use it just because you have it saved in your file folder, but it's a good idea to have them easily accessible. So I'm just going to speed this up and open up the files that I'll be working with today. Okay, so all my files are open that I'll be using. If you have more files that are showing up there, up here on your top of your screen here, you can hit this little arrow and it'll show you all the files that you have. So I want to start with my background, which is probably this thing. Nope, that's the watch back, so it must be this one. Okay, so I'm going to select the whole thing, copy the whole thing, and then go to my file, which I named last name, first name, Surrealism, and paste. Holding Shift and Option. By the way, all the files that I gathered are high quality, large images, and you should do the same, so be thinking about that. Okay, so that is what I started with. The next thing I want to do is get the table. So I'm going to close these as I'm done with them so it's not confusing. Okay, so table right here. All right, and this I'm going to go ahead and very quickly remove the background. Okay, I copied and pasted that. All right, and I'm going to go ahead and close that. Oh, actually, I already did close it. Okay, so I have my table, I have my scenery. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to be melting my first clock. Okay, so let me grab that one. This is the one I use first. So again, quickly, I'll remove the background from this. Okay, so copied and pasted it, and then this is the one that's going to be just hanging off of this table. So I want to get it positioned somewhat how it's going to be and in the position where I want it to actually melt. Okay, so something like that. Okay, so I'm going to just go back and quickly name my layers because this will end up with a lot of layers and I don't want to get confused. So that's landscape, table, and I'm going to call this watch on table because I will have two watches. Okay, so working with the watch on the table, you're going to come up to filter and then you're going to use the liquify tool for this. Now, this is the instructions that are on those PDF documents that I put in my Connect, and they're also in the book in the front of the room, which you may also borrow. But one thing I noticed is when you go to the liquify screen, since I'm on the watch layer, the watch is what will show up here. Okay, but notice that it doesn't show up with the table, which makes this challenging. And I have not figured out if there's a way to show the table with the watch without altering the table. If you find that there's a way to do that, then please let me know. But otherwise, I'm just not sure how you do that. So I'll show you what I did to do this. So I'm going to cancel that. And I really paid attention to the watch position. So on this edge of the table over here, we have the number 10, okay? And then it kind of, if you imagine it folding around over to the 3. So I kind of want to bend it along the 10 to the 3 there. So I need to keep that in mind before I go to the liquify tool. So going back to the liquify tool, You just have to kind of imagine that that table is there. Okay, and I like to zoom in on this while I'm working with it. Okay, so what you're going to do is you're going to use this first tool, the forward warp tool, and you want to make this pretty big for this first step. Okay, so probably about that size, maybe actually I'm going to go a little bit bigger. I want to make it like almost the size of the clock face. Okay, so with that, I'm going to just start warping this. So remember, the table is going to go from the 10 over to about the 3. So you'll see how this works when you just start kind of clicking and pulling it. And this is something that you just need to spend some time playing with. So I kind of took the bottom part of what I see with the clock or the watch and then bent it kind of down. And then I'm going to do the same thing, but with the top, and I'm going to bend it back, or like this part needs to look like it's flat laying on that table. Be careful with this part if you have something similar. You kind of have to make this circle smaller when you're working with that. Okay, so I'm going to do that right now. Okay, I'm going to stop right there for a second. I'll go ahead and say okay so that I can see this actually on the table and see what else I need to do to it. Okay, so you can see that it's getting there, but I still need to work on this. I think I want to move the 10 up a little bit higher, and the 3's in a good position. So I think I'll move the 10 up and pull the 8 and the 9 down, pull the 2 back this way. Okay, so I'm just going to go back in to liquefy and work on that. Okay, so again, I'm going to check that out on the table, see if I'm going in the right direction here. Okay, I think the 10 needs to go back up. Okay, so I think the bottom looks pretty good to me. This looks a little high, so I feel like this needs to come down up by the 2, and then this all needs to kind of go out a little bit, or yeah, kind of to the upper left. Okay, let's check that out. Okay, I think that looks pretty decent. I could probably work a little bit more on this. This part's a little bit tricky, I think. So I'll go ahead and work on that a little bit, and then I'll show you a few more tricks with the watch. Okay, so that looks good. So what we want to do is we want to put a little bit of shadowing on this watch so that it looks more realistic. Okay, and that's pretty easy to do. So let me show you that. Okay, so I'm going to start off by zooming in to my clock. And what I want to do is I'm going to use the quick selection tool. You can use any selection tool that works for whatever you're working with. And I'm going to select just the bottom part of the watch. Okay, I decided I'm going to select this a different way. I'm going to actually use the pen tool to make a path and then select, because I want the path from here to here to be perfectly oval like the edge of my table. Okay, so I'm going to do that. And you guys have some pen tool experience now, so this should be a pretty easy option for you at this point, and it doesn't have to be perfect around this part. Okay, so once you have your selection, on the around the bottom part of the clock. To turn this into, actually you have a path, so to turn it into a selection, you're going to right click on the path and say make selection. Okay, and when you do that, you're going to feather this by 8 pixels. All right, and then we're going to go up to our adjustments and work with either levels or curves. And we just want to darken the bottom part of this watch because if you notice, the lighting on the top of the table is lighter, so we want this part to look shadowed. I usually like working with levels more than curves, but whatever works for you. Just to give this kind of a shaded, shadowy look. Say OK, and then Command D to deselect. Okay. Now we're going to also add some shadows underneath the clock. So to do that, we're going to add a layer just above the table layer. And I'm going to call this Table Shadows. And we want to clip this to the table layer. So we're going to right click and hit Create Clipping Mask. Okay, then we're going to go to black, get a brush, and make it a soft brush with 0% hardness. And you can also like lower your opacity and flow a little bit for this. And okay, so when I paint the shadow of this watch, it's going to not go on top of the watch because the watch's layer is actually above this, and it's just going to clip it to that table layer. So you can see how that works. It's coming out a little darker than I'd like it, so I'm actually going to even bring this down around the 50% range. Okay, so that's a very easy way to just kind of give that a little bit of a shadow effect on that table. All right. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put in the tree, and I'm going to work on the second watch, which I'll speed up through that since you kind of have the idea of how to work with the liquify tool to make these watches look like they're limp. And this second watch is a little bit different though, because the front of the watch, half of the watch is the front of the watch, and the other half that's showing is the back of the watch. So I'll be working with 2 images, a front and a back. Okay, so pay attention to how I do that. Okay, so I think that's looking pretty good right there. So that's going to be it for today. The next time I will be placing some of the creatures that I had, the ice cube sun, and I'll show you how to do a hole in a person, like the girl with the hole. Okay, so if you're interested in any of those things, that will be next.